I believe the essence of great communication is a passion and an energy for what you're talking about. If you're passionate about what you're thinking of and what you want to get across to people, somehow the communication looks after itself. The best managers are the ones who have a passion for what they're trying to achieve, and they can carry their team along with it. And that's the sort of skills I'd like to bring out in people. The range of courses we do offer is quite diverse. It covers a whole range of different areas, but interestingly enough, it's got effective communication at its core, which applies to everybody. So it falls into 5 main areas: presentation skills, obviously, and how to get your ideas across, which is pretty crucial at all levels in an organisation. My passion's around conflict, and especially the difficult bits of communication. That's a real sort of interest of mine and applies again everywhere. But then a lot around team skills and how best to bring out the leadership qualities of the people around you. Personal profiling and the different managing diversity and how to handle those different situations. And there's a whole range just around life skills to do with communication, especially, for example, time management and stress management. So a lot of different courses, but basically with human communication as the sort of the common theme throughout all of them. One of the great things about my job is the variety of people that I actually get to work with as part of the work that I do, from young school children right through to senior managers in large corporations, different nationalities within an organisation, from the truck drivers and the forklift people at the bottom of the organisation somehow, right through to the chief executive and the senior board at the top. So it's a magic range of different people, and yet, interestingly enough, very recurring issues throughout all those groups. Size of audience is actually, again, one of the things that varies in terms of what I'm doing. Sometimes I'm speaking to a conference where there's 800 to 1,000 people, right the way down to one-on-one consultations with particular managers who would like to have that sort of personal coaching input. I'm often working, probably the commonest size of group is in the range of around about sort of 10 to 20 people, but it can be all sorts of sizes, and again, there's challenges in each of those cases.
So I think, as we could perhaps all appreciate, conflict is a considerable part of most people's work environment. Whenever I say what I do, people say, oh, you should come and talk to us, because conflict can be quite a divisive energy. And as you know, for example, in a shift situation, you've got 2 shifts that don't get on with each other. They each leave problems for the other one to inherit. And of course, that can be immensely divisive, sucks away an awful lot of energy from the team and where it should be going, and costs the company an awful lot of money. But there are ways around this. Most of this stuff is attitudinal, and if we could learn ways to see conflict in a different way so that people cooperate rather than fight each other, then that could make a tremendous difference within the organisation. We can turn that around and actually then start moving forward, which actually everybody would much prefer if we could actually make it happen. That's what today's workshop is all about. Could you give yourself a self-rating when it comes to time management on a sliding scale from 1 through to 10? The beginning of good time management is knowing the difference between being efficient, which is doing things right, and being effective, which is doing the right things. There are many people I know who are very efficient at what they do. It just turns out that half of what they're doing isn't actually what they're meant to be doing at all. I would like you, please, to draw what you think the actual split is in terms of how much of your time and effort goes into business and career. How much of your time do you spend with home and family? What segment of your life is your social community stuff? And how much time do you get for yourself? 20% of your time is spent doing tasks which produce 80% of the output that you're being measured on. And there's 80% of your time is frittered away. What are the time wasters that suck away our efficiency because it just sucks away our time? You folks know so much about what you do, and yet we somehow take it for granted that we know it. And yet that's what you've got to share with the people. So if you've got a twinkle in your eye about what it is that you do, for heaven's sake, let that show, because that's what people actually connect with. That actually is what makes all the difference when it comes to customer service.
Because I'm an engineer, there's a focus all the time on this is all very well as theory, but how do you do this stuff? So I'm very much focused on, so this is how you use it. So every workshop has got a workbook. We work through that as well as the information that I'm sharing with them and they're learning and discovering for themselves in the interactive exercises. But often, for example, within a workshop, there'll be an action plan. So what's going to make the difference tomorrow? And please go away and start to implement this. And in many situations, we have a follow-up workshop after a few months to sort of make sure they've implemented this. And what were some of the challenges? Let's take it a stage further. Somehow I consider myself to be global now. I mean, I was born in England, as you can probably tell from my accent. I then travelled a while. I lived as an engineer in Kenya for nearly 10 years. I travelled and I've now finished up here in New Zealand. On the way, I've learnt a few languages and worked in a few different countries, and so that's been rather good because I now do quite a bit of work up in the Pacific Islands and also across up in the United Arab Emirates, and have also been and done some work in the States and Australia. I consider myself to be very fortunate that I do get a chance to go and work overseas, because it's magic to be able to go and talk to different people from different cultures who've got a different outlook on life. It's something that's very satisfying from my point of view, and also I think that experience allows me to connect very well with the variety of people I meet in a variety of different audiences. So yeah, that's one of the nicest aspects of my job. There are some challenges out there in doing the work. Perhaps one of the things that springs straight away to mind was the first time I went up to the Middle East to do some work with an oil company up there, with a variety of different graduates and engineers on this workshop. The challenge there was the differing levels of English. Some of the participants had been to the States, they'd got their degree in Florida and they spoke very good English with an American accent, but there were other people on the course who were basically local fishermen, who had been pulled out of the village, come and work on the tugs in our oil port. They were able to speak a few words of English. They certainly couldn't read it. They certainly couldn't write it. The outcome was magic. That was the first time I went up. That was about 7 years ago. I've been up there, I think, 3 times a year ever since. So I think I got it right.
There is a fair bit of work that needs to be done when comparing the Cook Islands to other Pacific countries in terms of customer service, says confident communication expert David Henton. Henton is currently on our shores conducting a series of communication workshops. Earlier this week he met with the travel industry and currently with the CITC management and staff, covering issues of leadership, people skills and customer service.
At the moment I'm in the middle of a 2-day team leadership workshop for people in management levels, how to be a good manager, how to delegate and motivate, and those people skills that people struggle with sometimes. And then the next 2 days I'm doing 2 one-day workshops for other members of their staff on customer service. So how do you deal with difficult people, and how do you make people feel important, and how do you give a good service in those sometimes quite tricky situations.
Mr. Henton is scheduled to return later in the year. I'm Vincent Peters with tonight's CITC.